These are my picks for the top 10 movies of 2022. This list is completely subjective, it's just my opinion, so whether you agree or disagree, I want to hear about it in the comments section. Here are some honorable mentions to start off with. David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future, Matt Reeves' The Batman, Mark Mylad's The Menu, Ty West's X, Luca Guadagnino's Bones and All, Damien Chazelle's Babylon, and Scott Derrickson's The Black Phone. Number 10, Top Gun Maverick. This is a movie that stayed off my radar for an embarrassingly long time. I never saw the original, and big spectacle action movies aren't really what I tend to gravitate towards. But the recent Top Gun went a long way towards tweaking my perspective on that and making me more open to movies like it in the future. It goes without saying that the action sequences in Top Gun are incredibly well crafted and are enough on their own to provide a thrilling cinematic experience. But the movie goes far beyond just cheap thrills. Director Joseph Kosinski and his team of writers excelled in creating compelling conflict between characters we come to easily care about. Being familiar with the original movie, I assume, helps in this regards, but by no means is it necessary. In the end, that conflict and the action blend together to make an exhilarating third act and one of the most satisfying endings of the year. Definitely one of the most pleasant surprises for me in 2022, and a movie I'm looking forward to seeing again. Number 9, All Quiet on the Western Front. The war movie is a subgenre that, at least I feel in recent years, has gotten a little bit tired and the familiar tropes overused. Even when the war is a conflict like World War I that doesn't get as much on-screen depiction as World War II, it's difficult to discover a fresh creative angle to tell the story from. Edward Berger's remake of All Quiet on the Western Front doesn't necessarily go out of its way to be different, simply for the sake of being different. It follows most of the expected beats for a story of its kind, and does it with great precision and technical skill. The direction and cinematography are outstanding, and the performances, especially from Felix Kammerer as Paul, are top-notch. On its own, All Quiet on the Western Front is a finely crafted film and a very engaging watch, especially if you find yourself often gravitating towards war movies. But what makes it one of the best of the year in my book is the way it purposefully or otherwise recontextualizes the story's conflict in a modern lens. The way it portrays the common theme of the brutal futility of war from the perspective of a naive youth, brimming with glee at the prospect of hero status, ignorant of the true horror awaiting them, the memory of their forefathers' bloodshed forgotten and lost to time. The way the movie ends with the knowledge of the carnage to come in the following decades is absolutely haunting and caps off an unforgettable war film. At number 8, Pearl. Mia Goth gives one of my favorite performances of the year in Pearl as a starstruck farm girl who refuses to give up her dazzling dreams to settle for the small, quiet life her family provided her. If she hadn't already, Goth in Pearl establishes herself as one of the premier scream queens. Also serving as a co-writer, Goth and director Ty West paint a portrait of unbridled ambition that is deeply unsettling and forces you to reflect on the price of having such aggressive aspirations, especially during what is definitely the most disturbing credit roll I can recall seeing in any movie. I enjoyed Ty West's X as well, but there are a few reasons why Pearl made the list instead. Firstly, I prefer the Technicolor nightmare aspect to Pearl. Also because I found Pearl to be a lot less campy than X. It was much less of a slasher film and more of an ominous and fascinating character study, which allowed Goth and West to more thoroughly explore the themes touched on in X, while also giving Goth the space to spread her wings and dominate the narrative, which she does, seemingly with great ease. Pearl was my favorite horror movie of the year. Number 7, Decision to Leave. Decision to Leave is the latest film from the master Korean filmmaker Park Chan-wook. director of Old Boy and The Handmaiden. The movie begins as a sort of procedural drama. A man is found deceased, having fallen from the peak of a mountain, and foul play is suspected. Our protagonist is an ace detective trying to solve this complicated case and gradually becomes entangled with the prime suspect, the man's wife. It's a fairly simple premise, one you might expect from a classic noir or a Raymond Chandler novel. But Park showcases his mastery in the way the relationship between detective and suspect evolves into romantic interest and then into doomed obsession. The film moves at a deliberate pace, which might wear thin on some people, but the central conflict and clever direction from Park prove to be much more than engaging. If you stick around, and I would highly recommend doing so, you will be rewarded with one of the most compelling endings to any movie this year. The comparison that kept popping into my mind while watching Decision to Leave was Hitchcock's Vertigo. If you're a fan of that movie, or of any other of Park's work, you can stream Decision to Leave exclusively on Mubi. Number 6, The House. I felt somewhat obligated to include a hidden gem somewhere on this list, and Netflix's The House is the most deserving, at least in my opinion. It's a movie that got some attention when it first came out last January, but has faded since its release, and I think that is a shame. The House is, without a doubt, one of the most unique visions I've seen this year. It's a 3-part stop-motion anthology where the only thing linking all 3 stories is the titular house, a seemingly cursed estate that is full of mystery and for its inhabitants is often a wellspring of pain, horror, and frustration. The stories range in tone from melancholic to creepy and even inspiring, but what remains the same throughout is the impeccable stop-motion work and the deliberate emphasis on character. I won't say too much more about The House because it is one of those movies that you should really go into blind, but if you haven't yet seen it, you can check it out on Netflix. If you have seen it and want to hear my more in-depth thoughts on it, you can check out a separate video I made on it a while back. A link will be in the description and a tag to it at the top of the video here. Number 5, Triangle of Sadness. Swedish director Ruben Östlund's second consecutive Palme d'Or winner follows a celebrity modeling couple on board a yacht for the super rich, where things soon go tragically and comically awry. Östlund has forged a career out of his sharp sense of satire, and while that is certainly on display in Triangle of Sadness, I think his films are really at their best when they feel more like cinematic social experiments than a meticulously plotted narrative. We get to observe and sometimes cringe at characters that feel very much like genuine people navigating situations both ordinary and absurd. The result produces a lot of laughter and at times can provoke thought as well. Östlund has said in the past that, quote, basically all my films are about people trying to avoid losing face. With Triangle of Sadness, that universal theme of Östlund's intersects with his views on modern society, specifically with class distinctions. While always humorous, some of the metaphors that he uses here are a bit heavy-handed, but they culminate in a third act where the tables are turned in a very interesting way, which, of course, I won't spoil. In my opinion, Triangle of Sadness is the best of Östlund's human nature studies and well worth your time. Number 4, The Banshees of Inisherin. This was one of my most anticipated films going into the year. I've always been a huge fan of Martin McDonagh, and my favorite film of his is undoubtedly In Bruges. So when I saw McDonagh teaming up again with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, I rushed to the theater. Banshees shares some similarities with In Bruges, specifically its outstanding performances and its dark gallows humor. While there are quite a few funny moments in Banshees, it feels less comedic than In Bruges. In terms of tone, it feels more aligned with his previous film, 3 Billboards. But unlike both of those previous works, McDonagh's emphasis in Banshees is neither to produce a chuckle nor to shock or attempt to redeem. Banshees is the most lifelike of McDonagh's cinematic work. The film that feels the most like McDonagh leveraging his theatrical experience to deliver a poignant human story. Despite its luscious green backdrop, quiet rural atmosphere, and ostensibly silly premise, Banshees gradually unravels into a dark and fairly sad tragedy. The film oozes existential unease, and that unease is channeled through the thematic conflict of the broken-up friends. Should we strive for legacy, for temporary immortality through our art or work, or should we just be satisfied with leading a simple, ordinary life, enjoying time spent with family and friends? And how much of a factor is our environment on the answer and even the forming of the question? McDonagh gives the audience a lot to chew on, just on the film's surface levels. Beyond that, there is a subtextual layer where Banshees could be explored as an allegory to the Irish Civil War, and even as an allegory to domestic disputes, whether they be between individuals or nations. Although it isn't my favorite work of his, whenever McDonagh teams up with Fridall and Claeson, it makes for a mandatory watch. Number 3, The Northman. Another one of my favorite directors came out with a new film this year, and that is Robert Eggers with The Northman. If you aren't familiar with Eggers or somehow couldn't tell, he's quite fond of period pieces, and there isn't anyone out there doing them better than he is. With The Northman, Eggers brought his precise directorial eye and obsessive attention to historical detail to the world of the Vikings. The story is a straightforward revenge tale rooted in early Scandinavian folklore. The bare-bones nature of the story could, on paper, make for a bland movie, but Eggers prevents that by bringing the Viking world vividly to life. The excellent performances and cinematography go a long way toward perfecting the immersiveness of his vision. My favorite aspect of The Northman, however, are the touches of the surreal sprinkled throughout the film from Norse mythology. This is one of the hallmarks of Eggers' style, and in my opinion, is what makes his historical reimaginings as engaging and genuine as they are. Through the surreal imagery, he attempts to enthrall the viewer in the perspective of someone from that period by conjuring up the culture's myths and superstitions. If you find yourself enjoying Viking stuff or immersive period films, The Northman is a must-see. Number 2, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Saying that Hollywood is unoriginal and that the constant stream of remakes is uninspiring is so obvious, it's a waste of breath. Doubtlessly, there are creative people out there with inspiring visions, but the evil empire has established a seemingly unimpeachable obstacle, keeping these visionaries from the capital needed to bring their vision to fruition. After all, Marvel IP makes monies, independent ideas generally don't. But 2022 provided the movie world with a new hope. You don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to execute your cinematic multiverse vision. Everything Everywhere All at Once managed to rake in over $100 million just at the box office, and it did it while being everything that most modern studio movies are not: creative, inventive, unique. It's one of the most unique movies I've seen this year, and probably in a very long time. There is a bold, intrepid energy to the film that speaks quite loudly to the passion and confidence of the filmmakers, the Daniels. And to the fact that it appears everyone involved had a blast making this movie. And it was certainly a blast to watch. It seems like a miracle that a movie like this was even made. On paper, it sounds like a science fiction martial arts comedy with an affecting emotional core would be far too ambitious to pull off, and yet the Daniels pulled it off, and at a reasonable budget, a little north over $14 million. I do have some minor concerns as to how some sequences will age in the coming years, but currently those concerns are practically non-existent compared to the great wave of optimism this movie provided for the future of indie filmmaking and the potential projects this film will serve as an inspiration for in the future. Number 1, After Sun. Our previous entry provided an example of how inspiring directors can breathe fresh new angles to the traditional, yet sometimes stagnant, medium of film. Charlotte Wells, in her debut feature film After Sun, attempts and excels at altering the medium itself to create new angles of perspective within ourselves. You'd likely have trouble persuading would-be filmgoers to see After Sun based on its plot synopsis alone. In fact, there really isn't even a plot at all. What we do have are two characters, 11-year-old Sophie and her 30-year-old father, Calma. The two are on vacation with each other and spend about a week at a Turkish resort. That's about it for the plot. What substitutes in for plot are the characters, the depictions of quiet desperation, their subtle struggles, the emotionally grating pain of regret that comes when blissful ignorance has expired. After Sun is sad, to put it simply. If your tastes don't align with plotless and sad, it probably isn't the movie on this list you should check out. What I can say about After Sun, however, is that it's perhaps the most emotionally engaging movie of the year. No other movie has forced me into as much self-reflection and infected my mind quite like After Sun. Even if you're on the fence about it, I would recommend checking it out. I would like to say more about After Sun, but I don't want to spill its secrets in this video. If you'd like a separate video on this brilliant movie, be sure to let me know in the comments section.